Welcome to the deep dive. You know those annual shareholder letters CEOs write? Or ever feel like they're speaking a whole different language these days?
It's like, are they even talking to just shareholders anymore?
Right. We're going to decode those evolving messages today, diving deep into a fascinating dissertation called Stakeholder Representation in CEO Letters by Moran.
And it's not just about the words themselves, it's this whole shift we're seeing in corporate communication.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's less about just pleasing investors, more about appealing to a wider audience. So how did Moran tackle this? He analyzed CEO letters over a long period, right?
15 years worth.
Yeah.
From 2005 to 2019. And the trends he found are really revealing.
Okay, so spill the tea. What's the headline here?
CEOs are increasingly acknowledging a much broader range of stakeholders. It's not just about shareholders anymore.
So we're talking employees, customers, the community, all that good stuff.
Exactly. While investor-focused language is still there, obviously, there's this definite shift towards recognizing a wider circle of stakeholders.
But is it just lip service? Throwing in the word community once and calling it a day?
That's the thing, it's not. Moran's research goes way beyond just counting mentions. He used some really cool data analysis techniques to dig deeper.
Oh, I love when it gets technical. Give us the breakdown.
Think of it like mapping a company's social network, but instead of people, it's different stakeholder groups.
Okay, I'm visualizing this. So the more intertwined those connections, the more important those stakeholders are to the company's narrative, right?
You got it. It creates this really interesting picture of the company's values and how they see their role in the world. It's about responsibility beyond just the bottom line.
Which begs the question, why are we seeing this shift now? What's driving this broader engagement all of a sudden?
Well, it's a mix of things, really. But a big one is the growing importance of corporate social responsibility.
Right. Companies are under so much pressure these days to show they're making a positive impact. Environmentally, socially, the whole nine yards.
Absolutely. And it's not just about altruism anymore either. It's a straight-up business strategy.
Because doing good is good for business.
Yeah.
Especially with the rise of ESG investing, environmental, social, governance factors. Investors are paying attention to this stuff.
Big time. And CEOs are realizing that acknowledging these stakeholder concerns is just good business sense. It helps attract investors, stay competitive. It's essential.
Plus, you can't ignore the power of social media these days. Transparency is key. Companies are realizing their actions have a much wider impact.
Totally. And that's where things get even more interesting. Moran digs into this idea of impression management, how CEOs are tailoring their messages for this larger audience.
Well, we all do that to some extent, right? It's like adapting your LinkedIn profile for different job applications. We're all masters of impression management.
Exactly. But it gets tricky when you add in context collapse. That's when you're trying to speak to multiple audiences at once, and they all have different expectations.
Like trying to tell a joke that's appropriate for your boss, your friends, and your grandma.
Nailed it. And that's the tightrope. CEOs are walking with these letters. They've got to address employees, customers, communities, all while keeping investors happy. It's quite a balancing act.
Makes you realize there's a lot more to these letters than meets the eye. But before we crack the code even further, let's take a quick pause. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're in the thick of it now, dissecting these CEO letters. Last we left off, we were talking about how they're not just for shareholders anymore.
Right, it's this whole stakeholder inclusive thing. But I bet some listeners are wondering, so what? What does this actually mean for me?
I mean, it's not like we're all dissecting CEO letters for fun in our spare time.
Well, maybe some of us are. But point taken. It's about understanding this bigger shift in the business world. And it does have implications for investors, for employees, for consumers, pretty much anyone, really.
It's like we're getting this behind-the-scenes look at how companies are communicating their values.
Exactly. Take investors, for instance. This shift in language, it can be a really valuable signal. Are they thinking long-term? Are they considering their impact beyond just profits?
So, like, reading between the lines, paying attention to how CEOs talk about stakeholders that could give investors an edge.
Potentially, yeah. It's a glimpse into a company's priorities.
Yeah.
Are they just paying lip service to these ideas, or are they actually walking the walk?
And what about employees? I imagine seeing yourself reflected in a CEO's letter, like actually acknowledged as valuable.
Yeah.
That's got to be motivating.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It shows that you're not just a number, that your contributions matter to the big picture. And that can be a huge factor in attracting and retaining talent.
Right, because nobody wants to work for a faceless corporation these days. We want to feel like we're part of something bigger.
Totally. And then you've got consumers. For them, this stakeholder focus can build trust,
Yeah.
right? It's all about brand loyalty these days.
Makes sense. If a company cares about more than just their bottom line, if they're showing they care about people and the planet, I'm way more likely to support them.
It's like voting with your wallet, showing companies what values you want them to uphold.
Exactly. Okay, so it's not all just sunshine and roses, though, right? This whole stakeholder thing. It raises some questions about transparency, too.
Oh, absolutely. If CEOs are crafting these letters for a wider audience, does that mean they're less about accountability and more about PR?
It's that age-old question, are we seeing actual change, or is it just clever marketing?
$1 million question right there.
Hmm.
And that's where you, the listener, come in. You got to be savvy. Don't just take their word for it. Dig deeper.
Put on our detective hats.
Exactly that. Look beyond the polished words. See what a company is doing. Are their actions lining up with all this stakeholder-friendly talk?
Actions speak louder than words, as they say. Or in this case, louder than carefully worded CEO letters.
Exactly. It's about connecting those dots. Do their actions match their rhetoric? Because remember, there's always more to the story than what fits in a single letter.
It's a starting point, for sure. Gives you clues. Speaking of clues, no deep dive is complete without a little something to ponder. A thought to chew on.
Right. Okay, here's one for you. If CEO letters are evolving to include this wider audience, what does that mean for the future of corporate reporting as a whole?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this. Like, will we start seeing more integrated reports where companies address all these stakeholder concerns, financial, social, environmental, all in one place?
Right. Or will they stick with separate reports? Which, let's be honest, can sometimes feel like a bit of a disconnect, right?
Yeah, it's like trying to solve a puzzle, but you only have half the pieces. So much to think about. And for those of you who are into the nitty-gritty, the data analysis side of things, stick around. We're about to unpack exactly how Moran unearthed these trends. Don't go away.
And we're back, ready to finish strong. Before the break, we were pondering the future of corporate reporting. Are those separate sustainability reports here to stay, or are we moving towards something more unified, more comprehensive?
It's a question worth considering. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a bit. I want to make sure we give proper credit to how Moran, the author of our dissertation du jour, actually unpacked all these CEO letters. Because he didn't just, read them all and jot down some notes. He got kind of technical. Oh, tell me about it. I took a peek at his methodology section, and I'll be honest, I got a little lost in the weeds. Too many syllables for me, but that's why you're here to break it down for us mere mortals.
Consider it done. Imagine you've got this program, right? And it can read and analyze thousands of CEO letters all at once. That's essentially what Moran did. He used these techniques, one of them being semantic network analysis. It sounds scarier than it is.
Okay, so instead of reading each letter individually, he used this program to find patterns, connections all across this massive amount of text.
Bingo. With semantic network analysis, it's all about mapping out the relationships between words, like how often do employees and community pop up together, that kind of thing. It can reveal a lot about how a CEO connects what's happening inside the company with its impact on the outside world.
Interesting. So it's about understanding the nuances, the subtle connections, not just how many times a word appears in a vacuum.
Exactly. And it gets even cooler. There's also sentiment analysis. This one uses algorithms to figure out the emotional tone of the language.
Okay, so like if a CEO is using all this positive, upbeat language when they're talking about customer service, but then it gets kind of vague or even negative when they mention, say, their environmental goals, that'd be a red flag.
You better believe it. Sentiment analysis can uncover those hidden biases, those underlying perspectives that you might not catch on a first read. It's like, yeah, they said the right thing, but how did they say it?
We're talking about being language detectives, unmasking the hidden messages beneath the surface of these seemingly straightforward letters.
Love the way you think. And it goes beyond just sentiment, too. Moran also looked at the overall linguistic style. Stuff like how often they use we versus I, passive voice, all those subtle cues that can tell you a lot about a writer's intentions, how they want to be perceived.
So it's not just what they're saying, it's how they're saying it. It's those little details, the stuff we might not even notice consciously, that can actually reveal a company's true priorities.
100%. And the beauty of all these fancy techniques is that they can handle huge amounts of data, like way more than any human could ever process on their own.
Makes you wonder what other secrets are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for the right algorithm to unlock them. But hey, For today, I think we've officially conquered the world of CEO letters. We talked about the shifting language, the motivations behind it, even the crazy sophisticated methods researchers are using to analyze it all.
It's been a wild ride. And for all you listeners out there, I highly encourage you to keep exploring this stuff. Next time you see a CEO letter, don't just glance over it. Really think about the language, the tone, the connections being made. You might be surprised at what you find.
And that's the beauty of the deep dive, wouldn't you say? We take these seemingly dry topics, these academic papers, and we turn them into these journeys of discovery. So until next time, keep those brains engaged, keep asking those tough questions, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.